Hello and welcome to the 13th video that I'll be posting in my Unity platformer series. And in today's video, like I said before in the previous video, we're gonna be discussing about adding some jump animation and falling animation for our player. So without further ado, let's just go to our scripts, open up our player controller script, and directly from the player controller script, we can go to our enum state here and add two more states. And those states are going to be jumping and falling. Okay? So we're going to add jumping, which already is found here. And it's going to be falling. Okay? Now we have four type of states. Now if we go back to our Unity program and wait for it to load. Now if we go back to our assets and go to our Sunnyland, open our artwork, open onto our sprites, open our sprites, go to our player, and go to our jump. We can see that there's two images, and I want you guys to actually create an animation file for both. This is jump, for jump animation and for fall animation. So I want you guys to do this as part of a challenge, and I want you guys to make an animation file for jump called player jump, and for fall it's gonna be player fall. Okay, so pause the video right now and do the challenge. Okay, so if you did successfully did the challenge, good job. And for those of you who don't know how to make this, well, what you're gonna do is actually open our windows here in the top and go to our animation and click on animation or Control 6, and then you're going to click on player so that the animation window knows which sprite we want to animate, and then click on the arrow here and create a new clip, and then it's going to ask us where we're going to save it. As usual, I'm going to save this in our assets, and I'm going to save this in our player animation, and I'm going to name this animation player jump. Okay, and I'm going to drag the image to the first second here. As you can see, when we click play here, we can actually see that the sprite here is so tiny. Well, the reason why is, as always, as you know, this asset uses 16 pixels per unit. And in Unity right now, it's actually preset to 100, so it won't work. So we gotta change it to 16. Click apply, and there you have it. Now we wanna add one more, so we're gonna click on our player and click on the arrow, click on create new clip. It's gonna ask us where to save, and I'm going to click assets, player animation, and then I'm gonna name this player fall. Player fall. And then I'm gonna drag this animation to the first second here, and then when I click play, we can see that the player is basically like falling. Okay, now if I close this folder, this window right there, and open our animator, we can see that there are more animations. And if you remember from the previous video, I've said that moving an animator is unique, and you need to click on Alt and left click to move. Okay, now we've got our animations. Now what we need to do is we're gonna attach these animations to each other, and the way we can do this is by adding or making a transition. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure that we're using the states, okay, the enum state. So if we want player idle to go to player fall, then we need we need states to be falling. State equals to falling. What's falling? 3. And if our player fall wants to be an idle, this has to be, and in condition, state must be equals to 0. Okay, and for our player jump, from player fall to player jump, the state must be equals to, what is jump? Jump is 2, so equals to 2. And for our player jump to player fall, we want this to be equals to 3. And then for player jump to idle, we want this to be state equals to 0. And from player idle to player jump, we want that states to be equal to 2. And then alt to move. And we want player fall, player jump to player run. And that is state equals to running is 1. And then player jump to player run to player jump, and that means it has to be equals to 2. And player run has to go to player jump in transition. So this is player run to player fall animation. That means state must be equals to 3. And player fall goes back to player run, and that means that state must be equals to 1. All of these are connected now, and we can go back to our programming. So if we go back to our assets, go to our scripts, and click on player controller. Okay. So now we're gonna add more conditions to our animation state, okay? Because we want to include jump and falling. If we scroll down right here and go to our animation state here, we're gonna have 2 conditions, which is moving left or right, and it's not moving. And we're gonna add more animation conditions. So let's just create one for if jumping, right? If jumping, okay, just comment here. If jumping, then what I want if it's jumping is to check if the player, wait, give me a second, I need to comment player y is less than 0.1, which means that it's essentially less than is like this, right? Essentially increasing like falling, and then we want it to be asterisk. Okay. If jumping, then we want to check whether or not if the y is actually, if y is larger than 0.1, that means it's falling. And we want to make sure that if it's falling, then we want to change the player state. Change player state to fall, right? Then below it, if it's not jumping, so that means we can use our else if statement, because if we use if again, like I said before, it's gonna be simultaneous, and I only want to make sure that if it's jumping, then this will happen. Then after that, if it's not jumping, which will be delay, but then it won't matter because it will make the code much more smoother than having all of them running at the same time. If everything is an if statement, then all of them will be running at the same time and will lag the program. So that's why this case, I actually want it to be an else if. So if it's jumping, then we want it to check if the y is less than 0.1. And then that means that it's falling. And if it's falling, then I want it to keep on falling until it touches the ground, right? So if player is falling, and then if it's falling, but it touches the ground, if it's touching the ground, like after it's falling, but then it's touching the ground, once player touches the ground, then we want to change the state, change to player state to idle, because it touches the ground. And then essentially it will go back and continuously go to our other if statement, which is for moving left or right. And let's just make this an else if, because if it's an if already here, we can make an else if. And I don't want this to continuously run at the same time with this, so let's just make an else if too. Okay, because this is like the hierarchy. So jumping, if it's jumping because it's the highest priority, then it will go to fall once it touches, or the y velocity of the player reaches a point, or it's less than 0.1, then the player state will go to fall. And then if it's player state falling, and if it touches the ground, then what do? We want to change it to idle. And then if the velocity of x when idle is moving left or right, then it goes to running. And if all of these if conditions are not working, then it'll go to idle. Okay? So now it's actually time to put in the code, not just commenting the code. So what we're gonna do is, if it's jumping, and when we say jumping, we want it to be an animation, because there's nothing that can tell us it's jumping unless the animation is running, right? So let's just say if player state dot jumping, player state equals to states dot jumping equals to states state. Give me a second, I mistyped state dot jumping. However, who's gonna tell us that player state equals to states dot jumping? There's nobody who's telling player state to become states dot jumping. And if you think it in a way, jump method is actually allowing the player to jump, right? And that means that when the player is doing the velocity change, we also need to tell that player state is actually going to go to state dot jumping, so that the animation can run when it's actually jumping. And then since we can say that player state is jumping, then this condition right here can be fulfilled. So it's going to check for this condition right here. And this condition can be typed as player RB, because we want to calculate the velocity of an object. We use also player rigid body, not velocity, right? And then we want to make sure that it's the y position. And if it's less than 0.1, then we want to change the player state to false. And that can be easily done by typing player state, right, equals to state dot falling. Now, the thing that I want to teach you guys is actually, as you can see here, we use only one equals, and if we're using an if statement, it's double equals. Well, the reason why is because if we're just typing in a line of code, it's just going to say this equals to this. But then if we are using an if statement, it has to be equals to. Okay, so if player state equals to states dot jumping equals to, so the double equals is telling the computer equals to, while the one equal sign means equal only. It's just changing, and this is comparing. If this is equal to this, then this will run. If we are just typing a normal code, then we just use one equal, because if this equals to this, while in an if statement, it's trying to say that if this equals to this, then this will happen. But then if it's the normal code, then it's just saying this equals to this directly. Okay. And that is the main difference between two equal sign and one equal sign. And if we go back down here now, we're going to say else if player is falling. And from my previous explanation, I hope you guys got that point. So I'm going to ask you guys to do this as part of a challenge. I want you guys to write in if player state is equal to state.falling. Okay, so I want you guys to type in the code in our else if statement. So pause the video right now and do the challenge. Okay, so for those of you who did the challenge, very nice. You are a step closer to actually typing in our if statement and a step closer in actually programming by yourself. And for those of you who don't know how to do it, it's fine. So this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna type in else if our player state is equals to state.falling, then we want it to make sure that if it's touching the ground, then it'll go to idle. And this is really simple because we can just type in player state equals to state.idle, and always end with a semicolon, as you know. And now we're going to go and type in our code here for our if statement, and it says if player is touching the ground. And what can we do here? We are talking about touching, and that's basically colliding, right? So if player, I think we made player collision here, player collision, and what do we want? Is touching the ground. So is touching layer, and if we put in the bracket here, it's gonna ask us for a layer mask. And luckily, we've done that. In the top here, we've used ground for our layer mask, right? So it's just a simple matter of typing ground here, and then put in the brackets to close our if statement here. And then we're basically done with the programming side. So if we click play in our Unity program right now, and just wait for it to load, because we did type in a lot of line of code here. And if we just actually jump and see that it's actually jumping, look, jump, jump, jump. And to actually show it, to actually show better view of it, we can actually add the jump force to 10, for example. Jump, jump. You can see it does change to fall form. And as you can see, I did survive because there was a platform there. And we'll get to the camera change at one point. As you can see, now we already had our animation, and now it's time to review all of our code. Okay, so first of all, let's just go to the top here, and I think we've added our new other enum states, and that is falling here. Okay, and we did not change anything other than that, except our jump method. Well, the reason why I'm typing player state equals to states.jumping here is because if we do not have anything saying that player state is jumping, or we don't have this line of code right here, let's just pretend we don't have the line of code, then there will be nothing calling out this if statement, and the animation will not run when we're actually clicking jump or clicking the spacebar to jump, because there is no code telling to the animator that that the state is equals to 3, and 3 is because of this code right here. It says set integer dot in player state, and nobody tells or program the computer or tell the computer that when jump method is called, we need to tell that it is in the player state equal to states.jumping, like so. And the reason why I've just deleted that code and put it on top is because I do not want any delay. As you can see, if you put in the line of code, if you put in velocity here first, then this line of code will be executed first, then this. Okay? And now if I put it on the top, then this line of code will go first, then this line of code will be executed. So now, if I click play, there's supposedly no delay when we jump. As you can see, there are less delay. Directly when we click jump, directly goes to that position. You can see. And then in our animation state, we can see that if it's jumping, then we want to change, we want to make sure that if the velocity of y is bigger, is less than 0.1 f. And the reason why I'm putting f here means it's a float. And in the previous video, I've mentioned that float are numbers that can contain decimal points. And then, as always, I'm going to type in the code here, mathf.absolute, because I don't want the velocity count to be broken or miscalculated. And then we can go to player state.falling, and then if player state is still falling, so it's like connecting this code here. Once it goes to fall, and then if it's falling, it's touching the ground, then it goes to idle, and then if it is moving, then it goes to running. Or if it's not working, or all of these code are not executed, then it's just going to idle. And there you go. We're going to be adding more line of code about these animations when we touch the player hurt, or when we did create, or when we create the enemies for our game. But that will be covered up in the next video as the series progresses. However, for the meantime, I would like you guys to understand or find the logic behind this line of code right here. The reason why this line of code works is because I say in our jump method that player state is jumping, and if it's jumping, then it goes to falling, and if it goes to falling, then this line of code is executed, then this is executed, and then if it's touching the ground, then it goes to idle, and then if it's moving in velocity, it goes to running, and if it's not executing any of these code here, it goes to idle by itself. Now when we click play, it's just gonna directly go to idle because we are not touching any keys. If we do click left arrow, it's gonna run. Right arrow, it's gonna run. Jump, it's gonna jump, and then it's gonna fall. Jump and then fall. Jump and then fall, and then once it touches the ground, it goes idle again. Okay, so now we can control S here. We can save this file, close the Visual Studio script, and open our animator here. And if we actually go to we click play, we go to our animator here, we can see that it's actually going to player idle. We click jump, we go to animator, as you can see, it goes to player jump for a second, it goes to player fall, then it goes to player idle again. As you can see, it goes directly. And then if we do click left, it's gonna run, and it goes back to idle. And I'm just showing to you the animations. So I think that's it for me today. Actually, I've covered up all the topics for animations, and I think in the next video I'll be discussing about cherries, or something, or some form of currency that the game, or tokens that the player must collect, as all platformers will have this. And in Mario Bros they have coins, and in this game we're gonna be adding cherries. So I'll be seeing you in that video, and I think that's it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next video.